Every foot of ground and every last inch of civilization is worth defending with your life. Our own fight for the West does not begin on the battlefield. It begins with our minds, our wills, and our souls. Our freedom, our civilization, and our survival depend on these bonds of history, culture, and memory. And today as ever, Poland is in our heart, and its people are in that fight. Just as Poland could not be broken, I declare today for the world to hear that the West will never, ever be broken. Our values will prevail, our people will thrive, and our civilization will triumph.
Now, when I listen to the speech, I keep thinking, what does a typical social justice warrior hear? All this stuff about civilization, the West, freedom, it's everything the modern left despises. And that part about defending with your life, it must sound like a foreign language to people who think pronouns trump patriotism. So it's no wonder the very liberal Vox writer Sarah Wildman said the speech sounded like an alt-right manifesto because it mentioned family and country. That's how normal stuff is viewed these days. It's got to be weird for leftists to hear a man championing the right to pursue a better life, free from pernicious ideologies that seek to limit freedom, that seek to punish you. It must be hard for the left to hear that when they champion Women's March organizer Linda Sarsour, who says stuff like this.
I hope that when we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad, that we are struggling against tyrants and rulers, not only abroad in the Middle East or in the other side of the world, but here in these United States of America, where you have fascists and white supremacists and Islamophobes reigning in the White House.
Yeah, if that's a role model, then all this freedom talk must be sickening. To them, hearing a leader talk about those in the past who died to protect an idea, not an identity, how patriotism matters, not just pigment, I guess that's got to be gross. And to see the Polish cheering this message and this man, a man despised by coddled undergrads who think a nipple ring is an achievement. It must be weird for the ones who slowly realize that maybe this guy makes sense, but they can't admit it because it's Donald Trump. It might not hurt to read his speech in a quiet room, divorced from the voice you think you hate. You might learn that personal freedom is about safe spaces for everyone, not just you. So, Dana, it sounded like an alt-right manifesto. Technically, then all of our ancestors who fought in World War II are alt-right.
Right, and it is interesting to look at everybody's different perspective. But I do think a lot on the left had a preconceived notion of what the speech would be, and they were going to say this no matter what the words were.
Yeah.
So they didn't actually listen to the speech, because at this point, they're beyond listening. They're just wanting to spew it out. But one of the things I liked about what President Trump was talking about is how you shouldn't underestimate an ideology, which is what happened with Nazism over time. And what he was talking about is ISIS, and not just ISIS, but about radical Islamic terrorism and how underestimating it can lead to really dire consequences. And so you have to hit it head on.
Yeah, Jesse, could a typical kid brainwashed in leftist politics even begin to understand this speech?
I think you can if you read the script.
Yes.
I did that. I read the actual text, and it's totally different. This was a celebration of Western civilization.
Yeah.
It was a warning against encroaching socialism, and it all starts with borders. This was a celebration of borders. If you're a Polish citizen and your country has been invaded and your borders have been erased, it's still your land, Donald Trump was saying. And from that land comes culture and comes history and comes pride. And I think that's something worthy to celebrate. But it was also about freedom and God, which the left hates. And I said this before, he ties in America's arc of history with Poland's arc of history, fighting the Nazis and the communists and all of those oppressive people. But the commonality is the belief in God. And I think that's something that's very important. And then he tied it all together and he says, these are the goals of the West. Our goal is to defeat and destroy ISIS. Our goal is to defend our civilization. And then he did this kind of nifty pivot where he tied it into draining the swamp. Yeah. And he says these rules and regulations, you know, it's not about that. And it's not about the powerful, it's about the people. And he brought himself down to the streets. And we talked about that just a moment ago. And I think that's where he really connected. And you heard those chants, Donald Trump, Donald Trump.
Yeah, Juan, I think a Democrat could have made that speech 40 or 50 years ago, right?
Yeah, different time. I mean, the thing about this is, I mean, the first thing I want to say is, don't forget, this is a pro-Duda crowd out there. I don't know that this crowd represents all of Poland. This was a crowd put together by...
Was it Lech there, though? Lech Walesa, who was there?
I don't know.
He was on the stage, I'm pretty sure.
But I'm telling you, this is a crowd that was assembled by a hardline Polish leader.
So Polish
and
citizens
they're standing there, and they're yelling stuff like fake news, fake news. What do you think? They're being pumped up to perform for Donald Trump.
That never
Sounds
happened
like
with
a
Obama.
fun
But the
I don't think
difference
that's giving the Polish
is
people much
that-
credit. You're making them
no,
sound like
because
they're
I'm
puppets.
telling you what took place. But I'm going to say
I don't
this.
think that's what took place.
I don't understand why he would go overseas and make a speech of the kind you described, which is if you want to say, hey, in America, we need to be stronger, we need to understand our values. Because, Jesse, guess what? I'm a Democrat, and I'm a deep believer in God and Jesus, and I love liberty, and I love this country.
Well, I don't think
But
there was
I'm gonna
anything
tell you
divisive
something.
that
But
President Trump said today when he talked about the love of God.
Excuse me, when he is speaking overseas, and he talks about America first and ethnocentricity in the way that he did, I think it strikes world leaders, because he's not speaking to an American audience, he's speaking to the world as, oh, America's pulling back and America's going to look out for America and forget about the
He didn't
global
say that
alliances.
today.
KG, can you
Forget
respond to
about
Juan?
the
He never
response.
said that today.
He's claiming it was ethnocentric.
Yeah, I don't think it was ethnocentric at all. And in fact, again, just if you read the transcript, you actually look at what the president said instead of selectively kind of editing and what you think that he said and trying to like change it up. One of the things I thought that was most powerful was the prerequisite for the success of Western civilization is not material riches, economic prosperity, and military might on their own are not sufficient. Then he goes on to discuss about the confidence in core Western values such as free speech, the equality of women, respect for individual rights, the rule of law, and the affirmation of faith and family. That should have been fine for the left, and it should be really well accepted for people of faith and people of religious background, be it Democrat or Republican.
Well, when he's going after
Yeah.
the intelligence agencies and the news media, I think, boy, Vladimir Putin, he must think, gosh, this is great.
Especially when he then criticized Vladimir Putin pretty strongly. We'll talk about that later, though, America. The president